Today on X-Play, your favorite Lombax is all up in this place for X-Play's all-new Ratchet and Clank special. We'll get you up to speed on the story so far with the game that started it all. Going Commando, up your arsenal. And we've got a review of the all-new Ratchet and Clank Future Tools of Destruction for the PS3. Plus, we've got exclusive interviews with Ted Price and the Insomniac crew about the future of the franchise and how they come up with all those crazy weapons. Hit somebody with your wrench. Game time.
Hello, and welcome to X-Play.
Some days my job is horrible.
Usually, the horribleness involves reviewing Mega Man games.
Some days my job is great.
And usually the greatness involves reviewing not Mega Man games.
And some days are even better than great.
They are, to quote Nancy Grace, simply splendiferous. And this is such a day.
Today we dedicate the entire show to one of our favorite game franchises of all time, Ratchet and Clank, in honor of the release of the newest installment in the series, Ratchet and Clank Future Tools of Destruction, culminating with a nice fresh review.
We begin with a remedial course on the history and culture of Ratchet and Clank. Here's our look at the story so far. On planet Veldin, a lone Lombax is having trouble fixing his ship.
Final step, attach robotic ignition system.
He's gonna need a second opinion. Meanwhile, on a distant planet, a diminutive anomaly with an instinct to function another day escapes into the inky archipelagos of space. He's discovered that his creator, Chairman Drek, has decided to replace his failing planet with a new one built from the pieces of other worlds. He teams up with Ratchet to find the only man that can confront Drek, Captain Quark.
The name's Ratchet. Say, oops. I'll just call you Clank for short.
And so it begins. When Quark is found, they find he's in with Chairman Drek simply to keep his job.
Screw this up, and the endorsement deal is off.
Ratchet feels betrayed by fake heroes.
Captain Quark is really sold out.
Ratchet meets a plumber and learns a lesson. Regular people need heroes, both real and imagined, in order to believe in tomorrow.
Working people have to wait for Captain Quark to save us.
Going Commando finds the duo being interviewed for a VH1-style documentary called Behind the Heroes.
I guess no one needs a hero right now.
The CEO of Megacorp, an eccentric named Abercrombie Fizzwidget, calls on our heroes to locate a purloined piece of genetic blending known as the Proto-Pet. Ratchet goes it alone, but Clank's siesta is short-lived when he's kidnapped by the Thief. We discover the Thief to be an agent named Amanda. She warns Ratchet that the Proto-Pet will doom the universe. The trio confronts CEO Fizzwidget and find he's actually none other than Captain Quark trying to mend his damaged reputation.
Indeed.
Together they defeat the Proto-Pet and live happily ever after.
We're still pretty busy, but in a more, domestic sense.
In Up Your Arsenal, Clank's film career is interrupted by news that Veldin is under attack by a race known as the Tyrannoids, led by Litany of Evil Dr. Nefarious. Ratchet, Clank, Quark, and some others infiltrate Nefarious's base.
Impossible!
After battling through a pro-bot pop menace and a counterfeit Clank named Clunk, the heroes find Quark trembling in a hideout. Clank packs him a bag for a guilt trip, saying it's his last chance to be a real hero. They set up for a final showdown with Nefarious, whom they defeat with Quark's last-minute aid.
That wasn't even close to 60 seconds!
Their destinies are sealed, but are they? There are bigger questions and answers for Ratchet ahead. So, as you can probably tell, Adam and I are Ratchet and Clank fans. Now, I got the chance to go to Insomniac Studios and talk to Ted Price and Ryan Algier to find out just what makes a game distinctly Insomniac. Insomniac Games is familiar to millions of gamers as the critically acclaimed developer that gave us the Ratchet and Clank series and Resistance Fall of Man. But the superstar developer started small.
Way back in 1994, I started the company and didn't know what the hell I was doing. I just had this idea that it would be great to make console video games.
Insomniac's first title was a first-person shooter called Disruptor, which proved a rather tough sell.
We put together a demo for our first game called Disruptor, and it was something that was technically very impressive.
We couldn't afford an SGI computer because they're $40,000. The software was $40,000. So we were building levels in Excel. Ted would actually enter the coordinates for every polygon in an Excel spreadsheet and the name of the texture that would go on it. And that was our level editor back in the day.
We took this demo and ran up and down the West Coast knocking on publishers' doors, just finding out if anybody had any interest, and every single time we got the door slammed in our faces.
I'm ready to go.
After a presentation to Universal Interactive Studios, Ted and Brian's luck changed.
And so I remember driving back from Los Angeles that night. When we got home, I had a message go on the phone, and he said, let's do a 3-game deal. And that was probably one of the most pivotal moments of my own life.
School's over, and now the real lessons begin.
For their second title, Insomniac went for the fantastical in Spyro the Dragon.
Spyro was the first one where we started introducing humor into our games.
I guess he was all bark.
And kind of having sort of that whimsical touch. And I think that's something we've kept with us, like maybe not so much of Resistance, but about every other game we've made.
After 3 Spyro titles, Insomniac unleashed Ratchet and Clank upon an unsuspecting PlayStation 2, and the duo have defined action platforming for a generation. Insomniac itself has become larger, more successful, and is consistently named one of the 10 best small companies to work for in the United States. Through the years, a few key elements have remained constant through all the company's games.
I think with Disruptor, we discovered a lot about what an Insomniac game is, and I think the key there was variety. And everybody who comes on board, especially those who have played our games, kind of realizes that's the expectation.
The key is you have to hit that note every single level, every single minute, because if you ever fail, people have so many different things competing for their attention. Like all it takes is one bad level or one bad 5-minute experience, and the game gets put down, and the player's gonna walk away from it.
Now, with 2 next-gen offerings in the bag, Insomniac continues to plan future PS3 projects.
It's that energy that you get from finding the right idea and getting everybody to kind of come together that drives the creation of these games, and that's always the same for us.
He seems to know his way around the block.
One of the things we've always loved about Ratchet and Clank games is a mix of weapons that range from the badass to the hilarious. If you ever needed an excuse to play a game, getting to go through with the super expensive, super powerful Rhino gun is more than enough. With a look back at this creative development of weaponry, here's a retrospective on the weapons of Ratchet and Clank.
Violence. It's so damn refreshing. But you can't have violence, true honest-to-goodness violence, without a good weapon. And that's where the Ratchet and Clank series stands out. They have those weapons. So let's just take a look-see at what we have to look forward to with the new weapons of Ratchet and Clank.
We're not designing things that are truly going to hurt people. We're designing things for entertainment value. So let's go for broke and do the craziest, in some cases most grotesque thing we can think of.
We've seen what Ratchet and Clank have used in the past. How will that be topped in the future, or should we say the future tools of destruction?
The Ratchet and Clank Future, we wanted to create a whole new arsenal. Plus, we didn't want to take a lot of these old weapons and res them up when we're really just building something new. We want to keep the games fresh and always full of surprises. I think a lot of players really enjoy trying to figure out what's around the next corner, what new weapon will they be able to purchase. And so we didn't want to just give them a rehash of what they've seen before. So we'll come up with stuff like the Disco Bomb, which will make enemies dance, and that ended up being the Groovitron. Or we'll have, Tornado Launcher, and there's just a lot of crazy stuff.
We like crazy stuff, but isn't this just a little too crazy?
It makes you really kind of appreciate the whole arsenal without sort of being overwhelmed by it, because you're talking about over 20 different weapons and devices. It's easy to be like, do I really need this extra one? And the whole core of the game is, yes, we're going to make you need that next weapon. You are going to have to earn it and buy it. And there's going to be a time where you're going to have to use it in combat.
We found that towards the end of Ratchet & Clank Future, you're using most of your weapons, and it becomes this point where you may not have been relying on the Groovitrons as much, like, oh, I don't really need to use those, but later you find yourself, man, I want to make that enemy dance so I can live to see the next level.
I think I speak for all of us. We all want to live to see the next level.
heart the Groovatron. And I think we can all agree that Resistance Fall of Man would have been a better game if there was a gun you could use to turn people into ducklings. But with Insomniac consistently raising the bar on weapons, what can be next? What can be more devastating than a hypnotic disco ball? I can only assume some sort of bomb that confiscates Ellen's puppy and returns it to the dog shelter.
Coming up, we'll school you on the fundamentals of platforming. And later in the show, our review of the springiest, bombingest, disco dancingest Ratchet & Clank game yet on X-Play.
Welcome back to X-Play. And today is a special episode wherein we're giving our every attention to the Ratchet & Clank series in honor of the release of Ratchet & Clank Future: Tools of Destruction, and also because Ratchet & Clank is badass. And for a little context on what makes the games so good, here's a primer on the history of platforming.
Platform games have a rich, vibrant history, rivaling that of World War II, the Ming Dynasty, and the last 3 seasons of Family Matters. The actual term platformer describes games where running and jumping on platforms is an integral part of the gameplay. So, what was the first one? Well, many people actually credit Frogs, an arcade title from way back in 1978. The game allowed you to jump, which was, believe it or not, a big deal back then. A couple years later, Universal released Space Panic, which is widely considered the first true platformer, despite the fact that you can't actually jump. Yep, video games used to suck. In 1981, Nintendo came up with a brightly colored simian simulator called Donkey Kong. A year later, Activision released Pitfall for the Atari 2600, and the platform game was cemented as a permanent fixture in the world of video games. In 1985, Super Mario Bros. Landed on the Nintendo Entertainment System. It was the first console platform game to feature a cohesive storyline and smooth scrolling levels. But there was an upstart ready to claim Mario's throne, a little blue blur named Sonic the Hedgehog. His star turn came in 1991 and raised the bar with unprecedented side-scrolling speed. Nintendo still had some successes in the 16-bit era, but gamers' attentions began to shift to the next generation of flashy 3D graphics. Unfortunately, early polygonal platform games just didn't quite meet the mark. They were either too linear or too sloppy to ignite players' imaginations. Anyone here remember Jumping Flash? Yeah, didn't think so. Fortunately, in 1996, Super Mario 64 showed game makers everywhere how to do it right. Here we go! One of those games was Banjo-Kazooie, a gem from developer Rareware that essentially perfected the 3D platform template. Surprisingly, though, neither Nintendo nor Sega did all that well in the last console war. Wait! No, the crown actually went to Sony, who published hugely successful new franchises like the Jak series, and of course our friends, Ratchet & Clank. Yes! To check out all the extras from our special Ratchet episode, come over to g4tv.com/xplay. In a moment, we talk to the guys at Insomniac about the art, the mechanics, and the magic it takes to make a Ratchet & Clank game. And later in the show, the steely gaze of X-Play turns to Ratchet & Clank Future: Tools of Destruction as we give you our brutally honest review on X-Play.
The lazier the developer, the happier the gamer. The reason comes in 60 seconds.
Rated everyone, 10 and up. Ratchet & Clank Future: Tools of Destruction. Only on PlayStation 3, starting at $3.99. They're strong.
Game developers have big teams of engineers, artists, even game testers, working long hours day in and day out. But no matter how many nights and weekends these guys put in, they can never beat the sheer man hours available to the gamer nation. I mean, this is how we got Counter-Strike, gamers working on mods in their own homes. Now, it's great developers are finally starting to embrace this, not just by opening up their games for people to make their own levels and skins, but by making games like Spore and Little Big Planet that are wholly dependent on the players for content. I hope we are finally entering an era when all games are left open for the creativity of the gamers themselves. I'm Morgan, and that's been a minute. Welcome back to X-Play's Ratchet & Clank Future Tools of Destruction episode. And later on, we've got our full review of the new game. But first, we thought we'd take you behind the scenes at Insomniac to find out just what goes into designing the levels of a Ratchet & Clank game. The Ratchet & Clank series has always been known for its smart, challenging environment. We sat down with Brian Algier, the creative director on Ratchet & Clank Future, and asked how Insomniac designs its levels.
There are a couple things that we think about with designing levels. The first one is the more abstract gameplay. How does the gameplay build up? What are the steps that the player goes through? And the other thing is the story side of it. What is happening in this world? What is motivating Ratchet to run through it?
We're especially impressed with how quickly the game immerses you from the beginning with Metropolis.
That was a big challenge with this level, was we wanted to make both a level that would kind of get you in running quickly and teach you as few things as possible, and at the same time make it feel like you are running through a city that's under attack. Once we came up kind of with our list of steps that the player would go through, we kind of meld those together and we create a map. And that's a 2D top-down view of the level. All the orange sections here is what gets destroyed. We'll hop over to here and then travel around this building. This whole building gets destroyed as Ratchet's going around it.
After a level is visualized as a map, it gets more fleshed out in 3 dimensions.
We built the level in 3D and just as simple gray boxes, and we would just run through it and see how it felt. And it was very easy to make quick adjustments. You could remove buildings, we could move grind rails.
As with every Ratchet & Clank game, you get a good mix of platforming and shooting.
And so really we wanted to strike that balance between combat and traversal, and we felt like we did it pretty good. It is probably the first big action platform that's coming out for the next generation.
You think?
The distinctive style of Ratchet & Clank games can't be ignored. Here's what makes the look of the games so damn memorable. No matter what the platform, you can't bring a game to life without a skilled team of artists. And for Chris Nichols and the animators at Insomniac, the hardware might be next-gen, but the inspiration is purely old school.
Really, it comes down to a character-by-character approach. You sort of look at an individual within the game and you try and come up with a concept that's going to work for that particular character. In this game, it was really a question of going back to some very classical animation techniques, a real return to kind of animation roots and saying, okay, these are the principles that really made those early 2D cartoons so exciting. How can we learn from those techniques and find out how to develop them better in 3D?
Turning towards the traditions of old school animation is one thing, but doing it on a system like the PS3 is another story altogether.
Beyond just thinking about it as a generational leap, all the cutscenes are rendered using the game engine. The facial performance that you see on Ratchet or Clank or any of the characters in the cutscenes could also be articulated within the real-time experience in the game itself. The kind of articulation, the kind of detail that you can achieve is far higher than we've been able to do before, and actually allows us to tell more interesting stories.
That sounds terrific! Tell me more!
It's easy to bring out a character's personality in a cutscene, but what about doing that for the game's other stars? The weapons.
One of the kind of enjoyable things about working in Insomniac is we've always had a knack for playing with crazy weapons. From an animation standpoint, it's less about the effects of the weapons or the design of the weapons. For us, it's all about, well, how does the character react when you hit him? And that's kind of the mini payoff. One of the interesting weapons in the game is the Groovatron, and that's a ball that Ratchet can throw out, and whoever's in the vicinity will immediately start to dance. Certainly an animation challenge. There's about 60 different enemies in the game, and we had to come up with a different dance for each one that would really work with the shape of the enemy, something that I think has worked incredibly well and something that players seem to be getting a lot of satisfaction from.
While each of the Ratchet & Clank enemies have a distinctive dance, the X-Play staff only has one dance setting. It's Clog.
Up next, can Ratchet & Clank Future Tools of Destruction stand up to the hype? It's time for the review on X-Play. welcome back to X-Play's Ratchet and Clank special. Well, you've seen all the behind-the-scenes footage and background info. Now, there's nothing left but to give you the review. Here's Ratchet and Clank Future, Tools of Destruction. Attention, organic and mechanical inhabitants of the universe. Guess who's back? Oh yes, it's everybody's favorite Weapon Max Lombax and his tiny tin alter ego. It doesn't matter who you are.
Ruler of the universe!
There's something in it for everybody. This episode of Ratchet and Clank has more vertical views, is richer, deeper, and more ballistically blessed than any of the previous pairs' endeavor. Ratchet and Clank Future, Tools of Destruction, drops you directly into the PS3's processing muscle. From game start, your senses are hit from all sides. Tools of Destruction has plenty. Weapons are all new, though you'll notice similarities to previous ones. What Insomniac has done is to overhaul their bite and the depth of their upgradability. The upgrade system has really been designed to engage veterans of the Ratchet and Clank series. A new commodity pouring out of larger adversaries you've beaten is raritanium. These glowing shards deliver special upgrades bolts can't deliver. The weapons vendors let you apply this raritanium to allow you to upgrade weapons in different areas instead of all at once. Power, distance, and even how many bolts an enemy will yield after you've whacked them. This evolving upgrade tree gives the experienced player a true depth of strategic replayability in different battle situations. Another development is the inclusion of devices.
Very handy in a pinch.
These strategic armaments are harder to come by and more expensive, and thus more rewarding bits of Ratchet fun. The worlds are vast and in some cases explorable beyond the gaming path. Wings can deliver you places within certain levels to find secret items, creating a previously unseen depth in the series. Naturally, the comedy, story, and characters are vintage Ratchet.
Oh, just a little thing I like to call saving the universe.
Great characters detailed perfectly with subtle personality quirks and tight writing make the cast of Ratchet and Clank Future, Tools of Destruction, ready for prime time.
Surrender your battle, or be cast to the depths of the universe!
We're really impressed by what Insomniac delivered with Tools of Destruction. They've taken PSP processing and turned it into a high-definition blizzard of destructible environments, worlds full of living ambient detail, perfect platforming, waves of enemies, and an overhauled combat system. With 19 deep levels, you won't be disappointed. A 5 out of 5.
But I figured, hey, if you were in the neighborhood, maybe.
Is that a surprise?
No, it isn't, but thank you, Insomniac, for doing it yet again.
And thanks for watching X-Play, and stick around because another X-Play starts right now.